What's up, everybody? I'm Jason, and welcome back to the third and final part of my three-part mini-series looking at manual focusing with the EOS R5. So in the first two parts, I covered the basics of manual focus mode and the manual focusing aids that are available on the R5. This time, I'm going to look at the settings that can be used to customize and control manual focusing for and with electronic focusing lenses. Now, as with most of these videos, much if not all of what I'm going to cover here also applies to the R5's sibling cameras, including the EOS R, RP, R6, and R3. However, I own and shoot with an R5, so that's where this video focuses and what I've used for all of my testing. As such, if you use one of those other cameras, there may be differences between your camera and mine that I won't explicitly cover. Now, I've also broken this video into two sections. The first section covers the settings that affect the lens's electronic focusing ring. These are the rotation direction and the focus ring sensitivity. In the second section, I'm going to look at the settings that affect full-time manual focusing on the R5. So let's start off by looking at the settings that affect the electronic focusing of the lens's electronic focusing ring. So first off is the focus ring rotation setting, and this is found on the AF5 menu page. The setting controls the direction the focus ring rotates when focusing electronic focusing lenses. This includes all RF mount lenses, all EF mount STM lenses, and some EF mount USM lenses that are listed as using electronic focusing. And they can have the direction of their focus ring changed to suit your preference. Now, by default, Canon lenses use the left-hand rule for focusing. This means that if you point your left thumb in the direction that you want to move the point of focus, your fingers will curl in the direction the focus ring has to be turned for that to happen. So for example, if I want to focus towards infinity, I would have to turn my focus ring in a counterclockwise direction from my perspective behind the camera. However, if that doesn't work for you, or for some reason, then you can change this setting to reverse direction, and the electronic focusing lenses will use the right-hand rule instead of the left-hand rule. Now, of course, it should go without saying that you can't reverse the direction of the focus ring on non-electronic focusing lenses. Another nice benefit of electronic focusing is that the relationship between the focus ring and the focus position isn't fixed. Traditionally, this has been one of the problem areas for autofocus lenses. Fast focusing performance demands a steep focusing helical, which in turn severely limits the manual focus ring's throw. In many cases, the manual focus throw on, for example, a normal focal length autofocus lens is as little as 90 degrees. This is very short compared to the typically 180 to 300 degrees that you would find on a manual focusing equivalent lens. However, with electronic focusing, the lens's internal design can be optimized for autofocus performance, while the focus ring can be optimized for manual focusing. Additionally, this decoupling also allows modern hybrid lenses to take on cine lens-like characteristics, such as suppressing breathing and parafocal stability less expensively by utilizing multiple independently controlled focusing elements and automatically adjusting the focus when the lens is zoomed. The other advantage of this decoupling is, as I've alluded to, that the sensitivity of the focus ring can be adjusted in ways that aren't possible in a mechanical system. And that's what the RF lens manual focus ring sensitivity setting on the AF5 menu controls. Though the label implies that this only applies to RF lenses, in my testing it applies to all focus-by-wire lenses, including adapted EF lenses. Canon provides two options here, and these are varies with rotation speed and linked to rotation degree. Linked to rotation degree essentially causes the lens to behave like a ring USM EF lens did. That is, the lens focuses in step with the position of the focus ring, but there aren't any hard stops to keep you from turning the ring past infinity or the minimum focus distance. How much the focus shifts is directly proportional to how many degrees you turn the ring. Turning the ring faster will shift the focus a little bit faster, but still only over the range defined by the number of degrees the ring was turned. Now, the exact range varies from lens to lens, though typically it's around 300 degrees. Moreover, for zoom lenses, at least all the ones I've tested, The ring's range remains constant even though the lens's focus range may change. So, for example, on my RF 24-70 f2.8L, at 24 millimeters, the focus range goes from 0.69 feet to infinity, while at 70 millimeters, the range goes from 1.25 feet to infinity. However, at either zoom setting, I have to turn the focus ring about 300 degrees to focus from one extreme to the other. On the other hand, varies with rotation speed applies an acceleration curve to the focus movement based on the speed you turn the focus ring, not how far you turn it. In this mode, if you turn the ring very slowly, the lens moves in small, precise steps. However, if you turn the ring quickly, the focus will move much more quickly than it would if you were turning the ring at the same speed with this setting set to linked to rotation degree. As I said, basically, this is an acceleration curve for the focus ring. You can turn the ring quickly to make a big change in focus position, and then turn it slowly to fine-tune the focus to be what you want. So personally, I have my camera set to linked to rotation degree, and this is largely because it's more familiar to me since it mimics the manual focusing I'm most used to. However, it's definitely slower than varies with rotation speed. The second set of settings that I'm going to cover control how the camera responds to the electronic focus ring inputs when set to autofocus mode. Now, unfortunately, this gets complicated. So in an effort to organize this effectively, I'm going to follow the logical process that the camera follows and look at the settings that affect this flow as they come up, as opposed to just going through them randomly. Now, I'll be following along this flowchart from left to right, top to bottom, as I discuss these settings. The first consideration is whether or not you're using what I'm calling an enhanced full-time manual focus lens or not. With the move to the RF platform, Canon has really made things a confusing mess here. In the past, full-time manual focus simply meant that the focus ring could be turned, and thus the lens focused, at any time without the risk of damaging the lens. However, with RF lenses, this has apparently changed, and there now appears to be two grades or levels of full-time manual focus capabilities. The first level is supported by every RF mount lens and allows the lens to focus while the camera is in AF mode, assuming that some conditions are met. These conditions are if you're using back button focusing, or if you're manually focusing after one-shot AF and have configured the lens electronic manual focus setting to allow for that. Otherwise, these lenses will not focus before the autofocus system is activated or in servo AF mode when the autofocus system is active. However, now there's also some lenses that have what, again, I'm calling an enhanced full-time manual focus capability. These include lenses like the RF 100-500, f4.5-7.1L ISUSM, and both of the RF 70-200s, at least that I know of for sure. These lenses interact with the electronic full-time manual focusing setting to have a super full-time manual focus capability where they basically completely override all of the other considerations that the camera may impose. Now, unfortunately, I can't find a comprehensive list from Canon on which lenses have this enhanced full-time manual capability. And moreover, you can't just look in the manual, as every RF lens's manual says that the lens supports full-time manual focusing, but not all lenses actually trigger this enhanced state. So for example, my RF 24-70 f2.8L says it supports full-time manual focusing in the manual, but it can't be refocused in servo AF. However, my 100-500, which received a firmware update to support, quote, digital full-time manual focusing, unquote, can. So assuming that you're using one of these enhanced full-time manual focus lenses, the first setting that affects what's going on is the electronic full-time manual focusing setting found on the AF5 menu page. Here you'll find two options, enabled and disabled. When this is set to enabled and an enhanced full-time manual focus lens is used, the lens can be focused while in AF mode all of the time. This includes before one-shot autofocus has been used, after one-shot autofocus has been completed, even when the lens electronic MF setting is set to disabled after one shot, or even set to disabled in AF mode, and while in AF servo, while the autofocus system is running. Basically, if you have one of these lenses and have this setting enabled, the camera will always respond to the lens's focus ring. Conversely, disabling this setting means that the camera will treat these lenses the same as every other RF mount lens. Now, if you're not using one of those enhanced capability full-time manual lenses or you've disabled the electronic full-time manual focus setting, then the next consideration is whether your shutter button half press function is set to autofocus start or not. So basically, whether you're a front or back button focusing user. You'll find control over this in the Customize Buttons menu on the Custom Function 3 menu page, and I've done a video on customizing buttons, which I'll link to in the description below. When the shutter button half press function is set to metering plus autofocus start, so shutter button focusing, the camera limits when electronic manual focusing is available, with most lenses. Now, you'll only be able to manual focus when the camera is set to manual focus mode, or after one-shot autofocus has finished and the shutter button is held down and the lens electronic manual focusing setting allows for it. Conversely, when the shutter half press function is set to either metering start or auto exposure lock, so back button focusing, then all RF lenses can be manually focused before the autofocus system is activated, even though they're set to AF. Though manual focus for these lenses will be disabled if the lens electronic manual focus setting is set to disabled in AF mode. Which finally brings me to the last setting that controls manual focusing in AF mode, the lens electronic manual focus setting. You'll find this on the Autofocus 4 menu page, and it has 4 options. These are disabled after one shot, enabled after one shot, enabled after one shot with magnification, and disabled in AF mode. So what about lenses when you're shooting in servo AF mode? Well, for most lenses, the camera will completely ignore the manual focusing ring while autofocus system is running in servo mode. The exception, though, again, is those enhanced full-time manual focus lenses when the electronic full-time manual focus function is enabled. With that said, let's look at the options for this setting in a bit more detail. Now, to reiterate, these settings are completely ignored when using an enhanced full-time manual focus lens while having the electronic full-time manual focus setting enabled. So let's start with the simplest option here, disabled in autofocus mode. This does the same thing regardless of whether you're using a shutter or back button focusing, and put simply, choosing this setting disables the electronic focusing ring whenever the camera is in autofocus mode. With this selected, if you want to focus manually, you will need to switch the camera into manual focus mode. Next are the middle two settings, after one shot and after one shot with magnification. Simply put, both of these enable the manual focus ring to be used to touch up focusing after one-shot autofocus has been performed and while you're still holding down the shutter release or the autofocus on button. The only difference between these two options is that the magnified option will immediately zoom in to 6x magnification when you turn the focus ring. These two settings both behave the same regardless of whether you're using a full-time manual focus lens or an enhanced full-time manual focus lens, or whether the camera is set for shutter or back button focusing. Additionally, you'll notice that when you adjust the focus in this mode, the camera temporarily switches to manual focus mode, as indicated by the blinking MF icon on the screen. Because of this, any manual focusing aids that you have enabled, such as peaking or the autofocus guide, will also be displayed and are available for your use. Now, the final option is disabled after one shot. This will disable the lens's focus ring after one-shot autofocus is completed and while you're still holding down the shutter release or AF on button. For front button focusing users, this has the effect of, again, completely disabling the autofocus ring while in autofocus mode. However, for a back button focusing user, this can be used to protect against accidental refocusing after one-shot AF. In other words, after one-shot AF is complete, the camera will disable the focus ring until you release the AF on button. So, which settings should you use? I'm going to start this off by saying that I'm a back button focusing user, and I have my camera set to enabled after one shot as a general rule. Now, I've switched back and forth between the magnified and unmagnified options, but I haven't found one that I consistently prefer. In fact, I can pretty much make good arguments for both or using either of them. That said, this is one of those settings that I've found really comes with a good serving of personal preference. As far as the full-time manual focus setting, I have it enabled on my camera, though, as I said, as a back button focusing user, it's broadly the default behavior for all lenses anyway, with, a little bit less performance or capability. That said, one last note. If you're used to full-time manual focus EF lenses, then there's no configuration that quite matches how they work for electronic focusing lenses, at least not if you use the shutter release for focusing. Again, if you use the back button for focusing, then they actually behave very similarly. So if you found this useful or informative, let me know by hitting that like button. Still confused? Leave a question in the comments and I'll try to help if I can. Does this kind of thing seem like it might be your kind of thing? If so, then please consider subscribing if you're not already. Remember, you can't forget to unsubscribe later if you don't subscribe now. Finally, if you know someone who might find this useful, help them and me by sharing it with them. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.